Welcome to the Wolf and Bull podcast. I am the Wolf, and I didn't have the EQ set up on the
Sounded
sounds.
Great to me.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and put that in post. And with me, I also have my wonderful co-host.
The bull is in the house.
Good to see you. How have you been?
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I've been wonderful. Yeah. Doing a lot of traveling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Checking out other pastures around.
We've been very, very busy. For those of you viewers and listeners who consistently view our content, we have been all over the place. And just so you know, for newcomers, we are a podcast for those looking for captivating conversations, laughs, and a thought-provoking listen. If that happens to be you, then you are in the right place.
Everybody needs some thought provocation. Provocation?
Provocation? That's not a word.
I think I'm going to put that in my personal dictionary.
Yeah, that's good. That's very good.
Yeah.
Jokes just don't stop.
It's not a joke. It's just that's just me fumbling over my words.
Very good. Very good. Well, if you'd like to become a part of the Wolf and Bull family, then you can find all of our updates at the Wolf and Bull. It'll be right there on Instagram. And then additionally, we're also on YouTube. You can find us on YouTube on Fridays. And then audio wise, normally, if we're not globetrotting like we have been for the last few days, just no time to do anything, audio comes out on Thursdays.
The Wolf is very happy to be back in his home studio.
Yes, it's a nice, comfortable, safe space.
It is.
Yeah,
safe
it's very,
space.
very nice.
You're in your bubble.
I am, yeah. It's safe space.
Your
Studio
wolf
space,
den.
Space. Very nice. Now, just a quick reminder for our listeners, this episode is brought to you by Americano Ammunition Coffee, serving American patriots the means to defend their freedom, one caffeinated caliber at a time. Make sure to visit their website, ammoandcoffee.com. Grab yourself a bag of coffee beans or visit their shop in Queen Creek, Arizona. Make sure to mention the Wolf and Bull, and at the checkout, you get about 25% off of your order, which, according to your math skills, are, you did this last time, for every four
I'm sorry,
drinks.
I was floating off in a different direction. Can you repeat everything you just said?
Yeah, I will.
No.
I will. Basically,
25% off.
Yeah,
is
25%.
awesome.
Every four drinks you get one free. Is that what it is?
It is,
something like
as a
that.
matter of fact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm an amazing mathematician.
You are. Thank God for the educational system in the United States, right?
This is a fever dream.
You can divide by 4.
Now, we have a wonderful and incredible episode in store for you. Joining us today in the studio is a military veteran, former Wildland Firefighter and paramedic, and owner of Saguaro Forge Co., Bradley Spencer. Welcome to the Wolf and Bull podcast, Bradley.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Of course. How you been? It's been a little bit since we've seen you.
I've been good, actually. You know, living life, forging out knives takes up all my time, but trying to keep up with some custom orders and trying to take some new ventures with my knives as well. So
that's good. Forging. We're going to get into this in a little while, but I'm very interested in that. I think I've watched like one episode of what's the show about forging? What is it called again?
Forged in Fire.
There you go. Forged in Fire. I'm like, oh, dude, you know, Excalibur was made this way. I need to see this. So this is going to be a great conversation. Yeah. And you have an interesting background, so it's going to be fun to talk to you about.
Tell you that Forged in Fire show is like the bane of my existence because those guys make those knives in like 6 hours, but they got all the fancy tools and stuff. So when I tell people, I'm like, it's going to take me about a month to get your order to you. They look at me like, well, then how come those guys make those knives in 6 hours? I'm like, come on, man.
We know what the answer to that is. Buy enough of these and I'll buy the stuff to make it faster, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, dude, I got my elbow and my bicep, they have a hydraulic press.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a difference there, right?
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. You know, I love those TV shows and things, but people have to remember they're shows.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But they're fun. But it gets people interested though, right?
Yeah.
So bane of your existence in one way, but also it's like, hey, you know, this is kind of cool. Specialized forged knives and things like that. It's kind of cool to get into.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, and you can also get to a point where you get enough custom orders and you buy one of the people on Forged in Fire, and then they work with their tools. It's just a never-ending cycle of making knives. Which
we also
really
may have to cut that part out of the bane. Is this bane of his existence on Forged in Fire? Because if they call him tomorrow, something tells me you'd go there and do that and compete. No, you wouldn't.
Oh God, no. Wow. There's no way. You should. I'll be honest with you, right? I start working on a knife. I zone in on it, right? I'm like honed in on that knife, and then something goes wrong. It's a family show, man. I don't need to be on that show. I'm gonna be honest with you. Right? Kids watch that show. My son loves that show. I don't need him to be like, Daddy's scary.
Your son's like, why? On this show, they never say the same words Daddy says.
He's on Google on Urban Dictionary, like,
that's right.
What he said.
That's very good. Yeah. So, on a side note, do you know how they get on that show? Were you like, I don't know if it's like in the industry, they happen to have background in that. Just popped in my head there.
I bet it's like any of those other reality shows. There's a whole cadre of people, they interview them and they want a backstory of a certain type, and they want a certain acumen. They want some people that are good at it and some novices. It's a show. They're casting for a show, right?
Yeah, I think there's just like a submission form. You go on the website, put on your submission, and then it's like they just kind of roll out, and then we'll pick that guy and that guy, and just
part of
random.
That, so much power in that position. If you're working with a Forge and Fire, the one guy who picks everyone probably just thinks his farts don't smell. And if you do think your farts smell, I'm sorry. It's a lot of power.
I wonder how many free knives that guy got.
Oh, geez.
Right? People trying to bribe their way on the show.
That's a really good question. Right. Like, what do they do? I mean, do they just leave the knives that they made on the show? Do they bring them with them? Like, there has to be a ton that they don't use, right?
Good question.
Movie magic.
I don't know. Yeah.
Well, should I jump into the monologue?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, just to give our listeners a little bit of background, normally our show kind of surrounds an overall broad topic, but Bradley actually has a really phenomenal story, and we're going to focus in on that today. Honestly, I am really excited because it's going to be a really, really good discussion. So today's going to be a little bit more loose, a little bit more relaxed, but I still have a monologue, and everyone knows that I have some quotes. So,
a wolfalogue.
Yeah, wolfalogue. With that being said, I'll jump right into it. Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, "Peace has victories, but it takes brave men and women to win them." Sacrifice is key to much of our history, our society, and our way of life, and peace is only attainable if people are willing to strive for it. Peace is not normative. As much as we'd like to delude ourselves into believing this, nature shows us time and again that violence, chaos, and disruption are the rules to existence, not the exceptions. Unironically, violence, chaos, and disruption, symbiotic in nature by necessity, require a counterbalance to perpetuate the cycle of their existence. This counterbalance can often take place in the human form, be it through military expertise, wildlife intervention, or human ingenuity. As many of us know, it takes bravery, discipline, and a willingness to put your life on the line for those around you to perpetuate peace. Serving in our military is a calling that many of us can't answer. It's a toll, and its demand is extreme, both mentally and physically, and it's a lifetime of sacrifice for those that answer the call. Wildlife intervention, specifically when it comes to natural disasters, requires those that are highly fit, skilled, and courageous to look in the face of danger and act despite of their fear. There are many ways that someone could deal with the fallout from those experiences, and some choose not to entirely. There are some, though, that despite the struggle, push forward, forging a new path and developing new ways to contribute to their surroundings. Recently, we met with Bradley Spencer, and he gave us some insight into his incredible story, one of trial, tribulation, and overcoming. Today, we'll be discussing his company, Saguaro Forge Co., the inspiration behind his craft, and how his experience in the military and as a wildland firefighter forged him into who he is today. You know what's funny is the whole thing behind that. Normally I've got music playing in my ear, and this time I don't, and I'm doing it in post, so now you know the secrets. And I'm getting thrown off with no music now. It's just music throws me off, and no music throws me off.
Music kind of settles you,
calms me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, the interesting thing about that monologue when I listen to it is there are definitely, it's not a personality type. There are people that run toward calamity, and there are people that run away from it. And that's one of the things I look at about people that have spent time in the military, firefighters, police, different things like this, is their first inclination is there's danger. What can I do about it? And I don't know if that's built into us as human beings or if it's learned. It'd be a great, it's not one of the questions you have. I'm sure we'll get to, but think about that, because I would like your perspective specifically about that. Because I know people that absolutely, when something calamitous happens, they're gone. They're out the door, going in a different direction. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that that's wrong. I think that's self-preservation in a lot of ways is real important to the human existence. But there's other people that say, what can I do to impact this problem and make it better?
Yeah, I think touching on that a little bit, I think it really comes down to what you value, right? Because I look at it as like almost an animalistic way, right? You see certain levels of life not willing to sacrifice themselves for something, right? Say there's a house fire and you have maybe, let's say, an insect, right, has a low level of consciousness. And in that fire, it's getting out, it's running, it's leaving that house, it's going to preserve itself, right? But then you move up and you look at dogs or something like that with a little bit higher level of consciousness, and maybe they have a puppy or they have an owner in that house. That means more to them. They have that consciousness to care about it, the emotional intelligence to care about it. And so they'll sacrifice themselves to try and save that. right? And then it kind of comes to people as well. You know, what do you value? If you only value yourself, you're getting out. You're getting out of that house, right? But if you value others, you value certain beliefs, you're willing to put yourself on the line for those beliefs and those
to protect both people and or those things that you value.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's an interesting point of view on that. And you know, I do want to reiterate though, from my position, I look at, you know, because I think there's a natural inclination with some people, the whole fight or flight kind of thing that you've heard about over time. And I think there is an instinct. I go back to, we lived in California for 30 years. And and I have a geophysics degree. So guess what? Yeah, geophysics degree. I know all about earthquakes. Let's move to California. But I did it anyway. Beautiful oceans, beautiful views, all that kind of stuff. But I've been through a lot of earthquakes. And there are people that I know that freeze, absolutely freeze during an earthquake. And nothing, again, this is not an indictment of their predisposition to do so, but there are people that instantly go into action. And I don't know, psychological, I think you make a very good point on what do you value. The people you're with, the people that are in trouble is certainly right up there registering on the top level, but also kind of how you value your position in the hierarchy of consciousness, as you just said. Very interesting. Good point.
Bradley, personally, do you think that you had growing up from a personal perspective, do you think that you kind of had that innate desire to jump into action, or was that kind of built into you when it came to your military experience? Or maybe a mix of both?
I always had it, honestly. Okay. For me, when I was younger, it was animals, right? I wanted to save all the animals, right? I've always wanted to protect things. I've always valued, I guess you could say I valued things that couldn't protect themselves more than myself. So I always wanted to take care of them. I remember a time when I was younger and I saw a video on the seal hunt. Oh, that fired me up, right? I was like, I can't believe people are doing this. Yeah. I'm going to grow up. I'm going to stop this, right? And then reality sets in. And you're like, I ain't stopping the government. Exactly. Whacking seals with a club, right? But just the feeling I had, I felt this immense pressure to try and save them and save all these things that couldn't protect themselves, you know? And the military just kind of put that in a different direction where it was, well, you exposed me a lot to things that we don't know living here in America, right? It exposed me to the suffering, like true suffering of people, right? It's like, yeah, you see people on the street, you hear stories of people having hard lives or being messed with or, you know, but you don't really know how vile people can treat other people until you're in that position. And once I got there, it was like, I'm going to stop this, like no matter what I have to do, you know? And that was kind of what drove me. I think I always had it. The military just directed it,
refined it, focused it, right?
Yep.
Now, did that experience getting out of country and seeing that the vileness that people are capable of the most wonderful things and the most hateful evil things, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And it's, I would imagine, a very difficult thing to kind of balance that in your own head, especially if you're focused in with the military on doing what your country you're backing is trying to make happen. When you see people doing those kind of things, did it jade you a bit?
Absolutely. Yeah. Right? I could try and tell you, like, no, it didn't. It didn't jade me. I stuck to the course. I was American soldier. Like I'm out there protecting freedom, right? But no, it completely jaded me because I saw so many things, right? And it was even with the news, right? I saw how the news is more entertainment purpose. You know, I'm standing on a street overseas and I watch CNN and they're like, yeah, they're having a parade. And I turn around and there's RPGs flying down the street and I'm like,
that's a wild parade.
Yeah. All right. Well, I don't think that was a firework, right?
Exactly. Those aren't streamers going by.
No.
So it kind of, it woke me up, right? I felt like I lived in this kind of naive bubble, right? That was, they teach you in school and patriotism of America, right? And I was just completely innocent and under that little protective shell. Yep. And then when I went over there and I saw kind of what was really going on, kind of what was going on in the back, it was a little sketchy, you know? Yeah. So it definitely jaded me. Yeah. It really jaded me a little bit.
That's totally understandable.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And I mean, one of my best friends is ex-military and he Yeah, I from a proximity standpoint, I understand where you're coming from. I mean, it's I don't want to say it's sad that people don't understand that, because it's a beautiful thing that they don't have to.
Yeah.
But again,
I often think it's a twofold thing from my perspective. I wasn't in the military, so I don't have your point of view on this, but I think part of the issue is that there's a bubble around our North American civilization that we don't understand or realize, or contextually how the rest of the world, or a great deal of the rest of the world, lives and survives. Not thrives, but survives, right? So there's that layer of complexity. And I think people that travel, we had this discussion with the sheriff when he was on, about getting outside the country and viewing what other people are doing and understanding the differential and how good we actually have it. Then there's this other layer of kind of identifying that it's a lot more, best word is complex. Our relationship with the rest of the world, our position as the arbiter of what's good and bad, is kind of gray sometimes. And we have to understand that. And sometimes the only way to understand it is to get outside of it and look back at it. And it sounds like you've had both experiences.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the things I talk to my wife about this all the time, if you ask an American kind of like, how do other countries view us? People think like, oh, we're the best, we're the center. Everyone wants to know what we're doing, right? You got like people watching the Kardashians or whatever, right? We're like,
that's the best.
Yeah, it's the best show I've ever seen in my life. But you have all these people that believe that we're kind of the focal point of the whole world. But you go to other countries and we're not. You're just not.
Yeah.
And it changes your perspective of who you are, even, right? And talking about the military and traveling and going out, when you said it was twofold, it was, because it jaded me, but I wouldn't know who I was as well as I do now if I didn't go through that and really have to ask myself those big questions about what I believe, what am I willing to do for those beliefs, who am I as a person, what's my purpose? And that's the big one, right?
Yeah.
Is why am I here? Why am I doing this? What motivates me to do the things that I'm doing? And I really think traveling and seeing all these different perspectives is what allowed me to become the person I am today.
That's a really good message.
Good. It is.
Well, Bradley, for our viewers and listeners, could you provide some context, on your background in the military, maybe some of the areas where you served, or, your position?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a sapper in the Army, which means that I was looking for bombs the entire time I was overseas. You see all those movies where you got EOD, I love you guys. But EODs are non-combatant, right? So if, say you find a bomb in the road and you call EOD and you're getting shot at, EOD's like, well, you got to,
we're not showing up first, right?
Yep. Yeah. Cordon it off, clear the area, we'll show up. We weren't like that. They're like, there's enemies in the area. And then all of a sudden you got like Kickstart My Heart from Motley Crue playing, and we're just romping in, circling the wagons. And I'm not going to sit there and be like, what's the blue wire? What's the red? I'm going to tape C4 to it. I'm going to blow it up. We're going to move, right?
Interesting.
Wow.
So that was my job in the military. It's kind of like, it's almost like they took EOD and infantry and they're like, let's put it together, right? Yeah. And so I was a sapper in the Army. I served for 4 years active, and then I did 4 years in the reserves. During my 4 years active, I fought in the Sangin Valley of Afghanistan. According to the Google, right? I don't research a lot about. I was there. I don't need to see what everybody else writes about it. But according to Google, it was like one of the 5th bloodiest battles in U.S. history. But it was like the Wild West. So I spent a lot of time every day. We were in combat, searching for bombs. And it was kind of embarrassing, too, because you'd hit the same routes every day. They know you're coming, right? So I served there. I was a E4 specialist in the Army when I got out of active. Just kind of wanted to do my own thing, wanted to see what civilian life was all about, and see all these things people talk about, when you're in the military. Because I joined the military when I was 18. I was in Afghanistan by 19, and I was home by the time I was 20. So
can you imagine? My youngest is 19, and
I can't imagine myself doing that at 19.
No, I can't even. I mean, you're just kind of exploring how to become an adult yourself.
Yeah.
Few people grow up earlier, but most people are kind of trying to work out, as you said a little bit ago, who am I? Why am I here? What are my priorities? What I want to do? And you're thrown into a situation that doesn't give you choices.
Oh,
you have to do X. And you said something a minute ago that really struck me as interesting, because it seems counterintuitive to military strategy to set patterns. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you did very much patterned routes all the time, right? Oh. That doesn't make any sense at all from a military standpoint, because if you're hiding in the hills ready to shoot at you, you know when they're coming. Matter of fact, they should be here in 5 minutes. You know, let's have a cup of coffee before they get here. Did everybody set the devices? Yeah, okay. You know, doesn't make any sense at all.
You got to think, though, if those routes aren't clear, no one else is moving. So I had to wake up before anybody else operated, and I had to go clear those routes so they could go to where they needed to go. And they're like, yeah, you know, we're out there doing the hard stuff. And I'm like, yeah, man, that's because I just cleared the road for you. I already took care of everyone who was waiting for you.
So this really was a logistics routing kind of thing, right? You have to have this route clear, and you guys got to be the tip of the spear, right? No choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, man.
What did that look like? Was there a different process every day, or was it kind of similar time wake up, or if you got too much resistance at the time, you maybe a little bit earlier? Like, was it?
Yeah, you could get stuck, right? Like, I remember you could get stuck. You find some complex IED. You're in a firefight. EOD doesn't want to come out, and you're like, okay, we're going to be here for like 2 days, fighting this fight until we clear this area out. You know, you're trying to call for a helicopter. They're like, oh, we only got one. It's got 20 minutes of fuel. And you're just circled the wagons waiting for someone to come out and clear this bomb.
You know, what's funny is from a perspective of living here and watching a little bit about what goes on, whatever the media will give us, of course, which is always kind of slanted the way they want you to see stuff. Oh, okay, they called in this, and this sortie came in and did this and cleared this area, and and it seems very precise and very, consistent. And what I always hear from people like yourself, a few times I've talked to people, is that it's not.
Oh, no.
There's moment to moment decisions that are made, and there's human error all the time within that complex of decisions, and people pay for it with their lives.
Oh, absolutely. We used to joke about like EOD or the helicopter guys. It's like, well, okay, we called them now. They got to wake up from their nap. They got to get dressed. They got to hit to the flight line. Someone just shot at us, so they're going to stay there for a minute, and we would always make jokes about it. It's like you get to that certain level, and it's like, yeah, of course, they can't just be sitting there in a truck waiting to go all day. Right. Yeah. They got to live their lives. They got to eat. They got to shower. And it's always when they're in the shower or they're eating or they're taking a nap that you need them.
That's right.
Yeah. I would say nothing in the military was precise because it's all people. Everything is run by people. It's not a machine. They say it's a well-oiled machine. I'm like,
in what
all
context?
Elbow grease.
Yeah. So I know prior to this conversation, you mentioned that you are a distant ancestor to David Weisner.
Yes, I am.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. My ancestor, great, etc. Grandfather was David Weisner. He fought in the Battle of the White Plains under George Washington, and fought in the Revolutionary War and was on the Second Continental Congress. But after the Battle for the White Plains, actually, that's when he started doing the blacksmithing and he started making the bayonets and the gunpowder and everything. From my experience, I would like to say from combat, I can understand why he didn't want to fight anymore after that battle, right? When you read about that battle, you're like,
not a good time.
That's not a good time. So you can kind of see why he kind of went the route he did. But that's kind of what inspired me as well to go down the route that I did. My older brother, we have tools that have been passed down for generations in blacksmithing. And my oldest brother, who got them, he doesn't really forge anything. He welds a little bit here and there, but he's not a big blacksmith guy. And he knew that I was kind of getting back into it after the military. And he gifted me those on Christmas.
Wow.
And so every knife that I make with those tools. And that's kind of how I connect to my ancestry line, is through that blacksmithing, through that forging with those tools.
Now, did you learn that ancestry from your own family, or did you do one of those tests or anything like that, or get on whatever the platform is to look up your ancestry?
I'm from a very small town in Western New York called Newfane, New York. No one's ever heard of it. Until like 4 years ago, you got on Google Maps and tried to scroll in, it just turned white.
Wow.
So very small. And my family actually built that town in the past. So everyone's very close knit in that town. In fact, David Weisner is buried in my family cemetery in that town. And that's where he died in 1840. So everyone knows the history of it. We still have, I mean, it's very old school. We still have parades for battles we fought in the Civil War, you know, like I would grow up and be like, why is there a parade this week? And then be like, oh yeah, we took down the Confederacy this weekend. And I'm like, the what? You know, like, dude, I'm in second grade. I don't know about that yet. That's awesome. So I knew a lot about my history because our town was very built around the founding families, and I just so happened to be one of them.
That's very cool.
Now, did you think that played a role in your decision to join the military?
No. Yeah. I wanted to go, man, to be honest. I saw some of my buddies join the military, and they're going off to war. And, you know, I grew up watching movies and reading action films, you know, and I've always had this weird thought, right, about consciousness in life. I always had this thought like, well, we're all in our own individual movies, right? And I'm never going to see your movie because I can never see through your eyes. I'll never experience it, but I'm living my own movie. I get to decide what type of movie I want to be in. Is it a romantic comedy? It is at points. Is it an action film? You know, is this a story of going far overseas and living some sort of action hero dream? And I knew I wanted my story to have that type of action. So with the war, it just made sense. I'm like, man, that's something I really want to experience. I really want to go. Now, I was naive. I didn't know what I was really signing up for, right? You see Saving Private Ryan, you're like, man, that looks awesome. It's not. It's going to be terrifying. But that's what I wanted. Yeah. So when I turned 18, I was like, right at
one of the chapters in your story was that I'm saying, instead of letting the circumstances dictate that to you, you said, no, I want this as a chapter. Exactly. Whether you knew how to write it yet or not, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's very interesting. It's funny. We had, I don't know how long ago we did a podcast and we were talking about kind of some ethereal topics and how everybody's kind of in their own perceptive universe, right? Okay. It's kind of what you're saying, really. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. I perceive what's going on around us through my lens. You perceive it through yours, and Wolf through his, of course. And, you know, mine's better perception because it's me. Right. Yeah. In yours. And that's kind of the way we all are built. What is that called in the gaming?
First person.
No, I know it's first person. But no, the character thing you always talk about. There's characters that are central to
there's NPCs, non-playable
characters, right?
Yeah.
So in some sense, you're looking at this story from your own perspective, and there's a lot of those NPCs around you, but you get to determine. I love that. I've got a friend of mine that always talked about trying to consciously design your own life.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember the first time that person said that to me, I was like, I kind of wait for things to happen. A lot of my life is waiting for things to happen and then reacting. And there are people like yourself that take the opposite effect and they proact. And I think that's admirable. I really do.
Yeah.
Now, it may get you into circumstances where you're in the valley you just talked about in the middle of Afghanistan. And you're going, I could have wrote a different chapter, right?
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Totally different book.
Yeah, that's very interesting. No, that's something I think is always kind of, at least at the forefront of my mind whenever I talk with anybody, is they're experiencing their experience, and I can't ever understand it outside of like maybe being sympathetic, right? Mm-hmm. Unless I've been in the exact same scenario at the exact same instance, what would make me wonder if they're me or not, because I don't think it's the same for everyone. So I think it's definitely a very interesting perspective that you have with that, because I don't think that that's normative for most people. I think most people think that they're the main character and everyone else just kind of exists ethereal. But it is very interesting that you have that perspective. Now, I have to assume, and this is a very easy assumption to make, your service probably impacted your relationships.
Oh, yeah.
How did you handle that? And how did you, going forward when you came back out of service, how did you kind of move forward with those relationships that you had prior?
So I guess we can all assume, right? I have post-traumatic stress disorder from the war, right? And when I came back, I didn't really recognize it, right? And it's kind of strange because everyone has this, like, I guess it's kind of like a preconceived notion of what PTSD looks like, right? You're like nightmares and you can't relive, or you just relive the same thing over and over again, but it's actually a chemical thing, right? My blood pressure was always raised. My heart was always raised. And it's because my adrenaline was always active. I was always in fight or flight. Everything, when you're about to get in that fight and the room kind of like narrows in and everyone's talking to you like Charlie Brown, that was just normal. That was every day. So I couldn't really have normal relationships because I was always in this fight or flight mode. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. It was very tough. And then if anything was expected of me, right, I'm anxious about it. I'm nervous about it, but I'm not nervous about that. It's just my adrenaline is rushing and now someone needs me to do something. So I can't really make plans. I can't meet deadlines. Christmas is a nightmare because all my family's sitting at the table and the whole room's like, and they're talking to me and I can't even understand what they're saying. So it was very difficult. It was at first you try and hide it, right? You're like, I'm just going to drink, right? Because it numbs you out. You don't really feel that anymore. Now I can talk to people. I can go out in public. I can't drive there, but I can Uber there, right? Or walk, depending on how much money you spend on booze that week. But I can get around and I can live my life until you can't, because alcohol is always going to take over your life when that happens. And when that happened, me and my wife, she's like, you got to get into therapy. And so I started doing the therapy thing, started talking, and there's two therapies that they use for PTSD. They have a cognitive behavioral therapy, and that teaches you kind of who you are and what you think and how to compartmentalize everything, right? And then they have a prolonged exposure, and it's where they make you relive all the traumatic incidents over and over and over again until you can think about it and it doesn't create an emotional response to it. So what I did personally is I was going through the cognitive behavioral therapy to figure out who I am as a person and what I believe in, right? Because the values of the military and the value of civilian life, they don't mix. It's like oil and water, right? So I was trying to figure out who I was, what I believed in, what my purpose is. And at the same time, I've always written. I've always written, right? I kept a journal when I was in Afghanistan and I wrote poetry. It was just kind of like a way for me to express myself. So when I was going through that cognitive behavioral therapy, I was learning what I believe. And then I actually wrote a book called The Darkness of Treading Water. It was just for myself, right? Yeah. I did publish it, but I didn't expect anything of it. And I just wrote all my experiences down. And when you're writing a book, you don't just write a chapter and move on to the next one. You write a chapter, you reread it, you write the next chapter, you reread both of them. And by the time I finished, I had read through all my traumatic experiences so many times that they no longer made an emotional connection with me. It was like something else. It was just something that happened to somebody else because I had read it over and over and over again.
That was your reliving part of it.
Yeah,
that was like your therapy version of that reliving part of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what all I thought about when I was writing that book. Just for like a year, all I thought about was combat, until by the time I finished that book, I don't really care anymore.
It's amazing what the human mind will allow you to do to try to, and you said it a minute ago, compartmentalize the different aspects of your life. When you're in the military over there, you had to focus. You had to compartmentalize. This is the only thing that's important right now, because if it's not, I may not live, right? Mm-hmm. And to suddenly be thrown back in civilian life and have that kind of mental way of looking at things around you obviously was difficult. And that's an interesting form of PTSD that I hadn't really thought of, because I'm like most people. I hear about that, and when you watch things about that, you see these extreme issues where there's a reaction. You hear something outside and suddenly you're under the bed, kind of stuff.
Oh yeah,
right. But what you're talking about is very interesting, because it raise your heartbeat, raise your blood pressure, focus you in on only what's in front of you, and narrow that focus. Kind of like boxers do, things like that. It's like just the opponent there. That's it. That's the only thing that's important. Very interesting stuff.
Well, I think it's really hard for entertainment to kind of express the psychological aspect of it for people who've never been in something like that. I mean, that's a lot.
Well, if you said this a second ago, it's the sympathy versus the empathy thing. We've talked about that many times.
Yeah.
Unless I'm really walking in your shoes, I can't empathize with you because I haven't been there.
Yeah.
I can certainly see my perspective and understand to a degree and sympathize with the situation on anybody's part. But I think it's important to have not only these kind of conversations, but what you did by writing it down. I don't think people do that enough. Journaling used to be a big thing. Now some people blog, but some people use the social media stuff not as their own some people do use it as their own personal dumping ground for nonsense, certainly. But there's an introspection that needs to happen from, I think, everybody's part when they're trying to deal with whatever is big in their life, whatever's giving them challenges in their life. And I think writing it down is huge.
Oh yeah, because you can see it. You know, you think it, but when you write it down, you can reread it over and over and really understand what that thought process is that you're stuck on, right? And you can challenge it. And that's the important thing about even the cognitive behavioral therapy. You write out a list of stuck points, things you believe about yourself, you know, like no one will ever love me because of the things I've done. And you know what you do under that? You write 5 reasons why that's wrong. And now you create the solution to what's bothering you. And it's all right there, but it's so simple, but you would never do it up here. You know?
That's really good. Well, obviously I'm sure you have some opinions from a geopolitical perspective on all the stuff that's going on, what happened, you know, obviously with Afghanistan, what happened or what's currently happening with Ukraine, and obviously the soft war in China, which I mean, I guess we're maybe there. I'm not sure. I watched this on a side note. I watched this very interesting documentary. We're going to have an episode about this, about MH370, that flight. There's something else going on with that Malaysian flight, MH370. It disappeared in 2014.
That.
There's
I remember
a whole slew of stuff going on. So kind of relation to the geopolitical aspect. But is there anything that you want our listeners maybe to understand from your perspective, being in the military, you know, about what's currently going on?
The thing that I would say is, I feel like civilians have it kind of twisted in a way, right? Like, oh, the war in Afghanistan's over. We're finally going to have peace. There's never been peace. No peace. And one of the jokes in the special operations world is we have no boots on ground. And they look down and they say, well, thank God we're wearing sneakers, right? Because there's no boots down. But we're still operating in like 150 countries all the time, all year, 365. There's war going on. I feel like peace really only exists around the safety of soldiers, right? Like we build a wall of safety from the civilians and they don't get to see what's really going on out there.
That's interesting. It goes back to kind of what we were talking about a little earlier. Actually, part of your monologue, there's this cushion, this bubble around, and I'm very pleased that there's a bubble that I didn't have to participate in. You know, I'm not saying I would or I wouldn't. That's not my point. My point is that I recognize there's a protective layer, and I recognize that people sacrifice to create that protective layer. But a lot of people don't recognize it at all. And a lot of people believe that every time we stop one action, there is peace. But that whole thing in 100 and whatever countries all the time, we may not be defining it in the media as war, but what happens, right?
Exactly.
We're manipulating and moving around and creating circumstances that are to the betterment of our company for whatever we've decided as a country is right for us. And that's what all countries do, one way, shape, or another. We just happen to have more ability to get it done than the others.
Well, we also have a lot of distractions in this country in particular. So it's like we've always talked about, if you don't have, you know, crazy instances happening around you at all times, you can worry about some of the most ridiculous possible things and make those your focus.
Yeah, the protective layer is great, but it's also allowed us the ability to think about all the nonsense stuff that you hear about in the world today.
Yeah.
If we were worried about the next bowl full of rice we had to eat versus, you know, not worrying about anything really in comparison to the rest, it's back to what you were talking about earlier. People don't understand what's going on in the rest of the world. There's, you know, almost 8 billion people in this planet. There's 330-ish million here. It's a lot of people that aren't here.
Yeah.
And most of those people are, comparatively to us, really desperate in living their lives in hope for the next generation. And it's a day-to-day kind of evolution for them.
Definitely. Oh, so Bradley, you've served in the military. You've gone through these experiences. You come back from the military and you immediately jump in to being a wildland firefighter.
Oh yeah. It made the most sense, man. I mean, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go home. I'm going to get a good job. I'm going to do all these things because of all my experiences. But I got out of the military, looked around and was like, there's no bombs in the real world. Like, what am I going to do? I'm a bomb guy. I search for bombs. And so I came back, that expectation, what they sell you, you know, you're going to get out of the military. You have X clearance, security clearance. You're going to get this job. You can do this. Really, the only option to make the living that you want to make when you come back from that is to go back in the private sector, right? And I'm looking at my wife and my kids, and I'm like, okay, I don't really want to do that. But I don't want to be here per se, right? So what can I find out? What do I like? All right, I like being in the outdoors, love the outdoors, love being away from people, right? I don't like big crowds. I don't like all that jazz. So what can I do there? I love medicine. I didn't know that I loved medicine, but when I became an EMT, when I came home, I fell in love with it. It was like, oh, I can help people again, you know? And that's really why I went back into it. I've always wanted to help people. I've always wanted to serve people. I had this it's like a slogan in my mind the whole time I was in the military and when I came out, and it was make the world better than how you found it, which was very naive at the time, right? I can't make a lot of big change, but I can change lives around me. And when I got into medicine, I really discovered that I could really make an impact in this moment. And I was doing the EMS type stuff, and being 100% honest, EMTs don't make no money. There's no money in the emergency medicine world. If you're having a heart attack, the guy who's coming to save you makes less than the guy who gave you the heart attack at In-N-Out Burger, right? So there wasn't a whole lot of money in that. And I had to support my family, right? I'm going through all the therapy. I'm trying to figure out what I want to do. And I just got offered. I saw a little thing on Indeed. It was like EMTs make $500 a day. I was like, I'll make $500 a day. What do I got to do? And so I steered towards that route of wildland firefighting. I had no idea what it entailed, no idea what it was. I just was trying to survive as a civilian and saw the money and went that route. And then when I started doing it, I loved it. It was like purpose. It was like brotherhood. You know, you got guys, you're just sleeping out there in the sticks for 16 days at a time, 21, 23 days at a time with these people, you know, and you're just fighting wildfire, and you can see the impact you're making. You know, if the fire's coming straight for this town, and you stop it from getting there, and everyone in the town is like, yeah. And man, that's a great feeling. You feel like you actually accomplished something, you know? I don't think a lot of jobs get that. You become a personal trainer. You work with someone for months and months and months trying to make them a better person or fix their health. You're a doctor. You have hypertension, and I put you on meds for weeks to try and get you in a good place. Wildland firefighting, I can get that same satisfaction in like 2 days.
So it sounds to me like that was a surrogate for the previous rush you used to have in Afghanistan, right?
Oh, exactly.
I mean, and I totally understand. And because it's a different kind of enemy, right? The fire is your enemy, and probably more rewarding in a lot of ways, because you have somebody cheering for you to get that done and to stop that fire.
Oh,
and when you're in Afghanistan, you're a world away.
Oh, yeah.
You have a brotherhood, perhaps, but you don't have a town. Well, maybe you do. Maybe you had a town cheering you there too.
When I saved a town, they threw rocks at me in Afghanistan.
You know? That's a perfect example of where I was going to go with that question. I mean, there's a complete dichotomy. You're a foreigner coming in, you're fighting the fire over there, the bombs, the routes you had to clear, all that kind of thing. You come home and you fight a fire here, and it's like immediately adrenaline rush, rewarding, probably fulfilling that high heart rate and everything else you had and that focus you put on it. Very interesting transition for sure.
Yeah, I think it was perfect. I think it's a perfect transition. I think, one, you get to do good. You get that same brotherhood that you're lacking in civilian society. And you get the reward that you didn't have when you're in combat. Yeah, you come home and people are at the airport or something with signs like, welcome home. Yeah. But then that's it. Everything dies down. It all slowly dies. Even when you come home, your family's super excited for a couple of days, and then life goes back to normal.
So,
you know,
why do you think that is? Because that's something that's a question I've always had as a civilian, right? Like having friends, you know, having served, and, you know, to the Bull's point, like obviously, you know, if I needed to, I would, but thankfully I didn't have to. So why do you think that we've gone from maybe a society that maybe 50, 60 years ago really, really celebrated the people that made the sacrifice to create the world we live in to...
See, I think you have to go further back than 50 or 60 years ago.
The thing I think of is World War II, right?
Well, that's
and then everything kind of
almost 80 years. That's 80 years ago now. So,
math.
Well, I mean, because you were saying it a minute ago, people hold up signs at the airport, you're coming home.
Yeah.
Well, when I was young, people were coming home and they were holding up signs all right. It wasn't what they wanted to see coming home. Mm-hmm. These people had gone over to East Asia or in Asia there and come back, and people hated them. The same people who are, I'm going to go off on a tangent here. I apologize. I won't go too far afield. But the fact of the matter is you can complain and you can not like a lot of the things that occur, the reasons the government decides to do whatever it does, militarily or otherwise. And we're all human beings. We have a right to speak those things into existence. But you can't ignore the fact that the ability for us to complain is given to us by the very same people that we're complaining about. That's the trouble I have still today with a lot of the protestations that occur. It's more nuanced. Don't be mad at the people that are being asked to or told to run by a certain set of marching orders. Don't be upset with that. Be upset with the hierarchy that maybe is forcing agendas on other parts of the world. I'm not articulating this correctly. I think I'm getting it out though. I think it's certainly better in a lot of ways now. But during World War II, you had exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, like people would celebrate. There'd be parades. And granted, I get like there's a difference. Like World War II, people thought it was the end of the world. And let's hope we, stay away from World War III for a while. But I get it. But at the same time, there's still the difference in size is there. The difference is in some extreme is there, maybe at a larger point. But the sacrifice is not different. It's the same. The sacrifice doesn't change.
The sacrifice is a life, mm-hmm. Right?
So what's your perspective on that? Is there anything that maybe you see from the outside looking in that kind of dictates some of these perspectives that some individuals have?
I think the main difference is we had a foe that attacked us, right? World War II, we were attacked. So patriotism, right? Yeah. All-time high. You go get them, boys, and they went out, they did what they did. A couple years go by, we win the war, we come back, and we can say we got them, right? And people applauded that. People were super happy about that. Even this war in Iraq and Afghanistan, the global war on terrorism, we were attacked. So people were patriotic. People wanted, go get them, same exact thing. So when we came back, people were happy. I don't think people were happy when we got in conflicts where we weren't defending ourselves.
Where we initiate.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the problem people have, because people can't understand, like, okay, but those people are suffering. We have to go help them. They're like, well, why do, it's the same thing. People say, well, why do we have to help them? Because we can.
Yeah.
Like, why not? So I think that's where we get the divide. It's like the worst thing our enemy can do is attack us because everyone's supportive, If they just say words and we go after them, right? It's the same as self-defense, right? Yeah. Someone says the most vile things to you and you smack them, you're getting handcuffed. But if someone puts hands on you, everyone applauds you for protecting yourself.
Well, that's, yeah, and I can see that maybe as like a third party. Someone puts hands on someone else and then you step in and people might get angry with that. So I get what you're saying, but I still maybe it's because of my, relationships with some of the people that I have relationships with, where I see it from there, like you spent X amount of time somewhere that is obviously not where, you're used to being initially. Mm-hmm. You've spent X amount of time training, X amount of time seeing whatever you saw. There has to be some sort of compromise that people can give. And you get what I'm saying? Because it's like people getting mad. Like, I get it. Someone, attacks a town, burns buildings down. You come in, you put that fire out. But then a town in another country gets attacked by some people and you go down to put the fire out and people get mad. Yeah. You get what I'm saying? It's kind of a weird cognitive dissonance, maybe.
Yeah, really. That is kind of strange. And then they blame you for going to put it out. But I think people get it mixed up. The soldier is not the person who put himself there.
Correct.
Right? Not every soldier loves and respects and just blindly follows the government, right? Mm-hmm. We have a job to do and we're going to stick to the mission. Mission is always number one. But that doesn't mean I really believe the people who are giving me all the orders. Some of the people who gave me some orders were like, not the smartest I've ever met, right? Yeah. But people can't see the difference. You are the physical manifestation of that image they have of our government, right? And you're right in front of them, so they're mad at you. But really, you're like, I'm just a person.
It's the old saying, don't blame the messenger, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And the messenger is who almost always gets blamed.
Every time.
Yeah. So I understand it from a psychological point of view. It's disruptive, and it's wrong thinking. And it's also something that if we did a better job in this country of talking about these subjects and understanding that the direction to do these things doesn't come from the boots on the ground backward. It comes from the people making the decisions to put the boots on the ground.
Yeah.
Don't blame the boots on the ground.
And often it's very often there's consequences if you don't listen.
Oh,
that are extreme consequences.
Extreme. Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know. I just, for me personally, like I like sympathy wise, like it's like, dude, like leave those guys alone. Yell at the politicians, yell at the people who are making the decisions, yell at maybe some of the leaders from the top down.
Exactly.
Because if a commander comes in and tells you to do something, you can't tell him no. Yeah. So, and obviously my limited understanding of the different iterations of, allegiance and
there's got to be a chain of command or things get really weird.
Yeah. So it's like, I don't know. It hurts. It like on a personal side, it hurts my heart because it's like, dude, like they come back, you come back and you want people to applaud and do all that. And obviously there's a point in time where that can end, but you shouldn't forget,
Yeah.
That's just for me.
I honestly think veterans, you don't want to pedestal anybody. No. I'm not suggesting that, but they need to be recognized for what they've done. Not the individual things that may have gone wrong I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about taking the step outside the bounds of where most individuals would take.
Yeah.
Whether it was somebody that volunteered like yourself or somebody that was recruited in or however it happened. Take that into, a recognition of what happened. I mean, we're from San Diego from a year ago. And, California has a huge homeless population right now.
Massive.
And this is maybe a different tangent than you had on your notes and stuff, but there's a decent percentage that are veterans. And probably high percentage of those are PTSD problems because they haven't figured out, like you were able to with your wife's help and therapy and writing and wildfires and all that, to figure out their way back into a society that absolutely does not recognize them. I don't want to, hero is maybe the wrong word.
Well, let's tongue in cheek, if we can celebrate people for 2 years that I will leave unnamed over something. I mean,
exactly.
You get what I'm getting at. It's kind of like, I don't know, like it's a weird kind of cognitive dissonance that I think people have. Cause it's like, I would consider myself a patriot. I love this country. Now I don't agree. I definitely do not agree with everything we do. And I definitely don't agree with every single individual in this country. I'm a human being.
Right.
But like, I look at the scenario and I'm just like, dude, like you are like the people get angry, the people that get like viscerally mad at the wrong people, they are part of the problem.
Oh, absolutely.
Just direct it in the right way. Like no one, like I'm not going to criticize anyone for protesting. The respective people that you should, like you want to protest, be my guest, do that. You want to get viscerally mad at people who come home that want to come to a home. Mm-hmm. Like GTFO, get the fuck out of here. Like you need to figure out something else.
A home that they went away to try to protect.
Exactly. So, and obviously protect, there's people may go, oh, there's a difference between like you talked about a second ago. There's a difference. I get it. But at the same time, it's not different for the people that go. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So I don't know. I just felt like I needed to say that. So
glad you did.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's just, it stresses me out and bums me out because it's like, I see that whole scenario as like these people come back. I'm not a hug person, but that's an instance where you should, it doesn't matter what, like, that's when people need that.
You know what, Wolf, you know my wife, and she will go out of her way if she sees a hat on a veteran or something. She'll go out of her way to go over those people and thank them.
Yeah.
And, sometimes it's like she goes all over the place to try to find.
You ever get her to a parade?
We chuckle about it. It's like one after another. It's like she's shaking hands. But, I mean, her heart is into that. I mean, that is her heart. And she does it not for herself. She does it because she feels like those people are not getting any of that recognition that they deserve. No, and that's something we need more in this country, really.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So let's jump back into wildland firefighting. So, a question I've always had, because we're from well, I was born there. You were Michigan. But you know, I'm from fire capital of the world, you know, in my opinion. Obviously, it's a narcissistic kind of self-positioned thing to say, but California is fire every day. If it doesn't happen, it's weird. So how, as a wildland firefighter, do you balance the need to protect people and property with the need to protect the natural environment? I
can't really speak for the higher ups, right? But I want to preserve nature. I want to do that, but nature's going to do its own thing, right? It's going to go through seasons. Things are going to burn down. And a lot of things I didn't realize about wildland fires is that they actually make the soil more nutrient dense, right? So it puts nutrients back into the soil. So it can be a good thing depending on where things are. In fact, a lot of California, a lot of wildfires that start are because the local firefighters are doing controlled burns on a windy day when they shouldn't, right? Because they're trying to clear up all that brush, because all those weeds and all those little tiny brush, it's sucking the nutrients out, and the big trees can't get the nutrients they want. So me personally, though, I love nature, but screw nature. If if people are in danger and it comes to protecting life, I'm like, let it burn, right? Yeah. We need to get these people out of here, right? That tree probably has a daddy and a mommy that care about it deeply, but I know that person does, right? So I'm going to take care of that person. And strategically, I think they're trying to save people and preserve nature the best they can, but it doesn't always work out that way. There's times where we're just like, all right, back out, let it burn. We tried, didn't work out. We're not going to lose our lives.
That goes back to what you were saying about that hierarchy of consciousness, right? So your consciousness is saying, okay, yeah, tree might have a mommy and daddy, but in this case, I'm going with the human element, right?
Yep.
You know, in California is interesting too, because I lived there for like 30 years, like I said, and the environmental groups, and I'm not an anti-environmentalist at all. I'm kind of like with you. I kind of weigh things in their priorities. But they did a huge amount over the course of I think the Sierra Nevada group probably was one of the first ones to start a lot of this, preserving natural aspects. Doing the place I had in San Diego, we had quite a bit of acreage, and at least almost half of it, if not a little bit more, I wasn't even supposed to walk on. It was open space, as they call it. It's something that the builder of the house I was in did with the county, and the county said, oh yeah, you can build on there. You should have been able to anyway. You can build on that only if you say you'll pay the property taxes on all that, but you don't do anything on it because of what other wildlife may or may not be there. But the problem with that is that happens a lot in California, and then the brush gets bigger, and it just creates all this fuel. So whether it's a lightning strike or a burn that the fire department is doing, or whether it's something else entirely, it gets out of control. And then we blame the human beings that have encroached upon that environment. So it's a weird, it always comes back to politics, for God's sakes. I don't know why, but it does.
It always does. I mean, it's like, yeah, I want to preserve nature. I love nature, right? I love it. I want to preserve it the best that I can, but sometimes we take it a little bit too far.
A little too far.
We're taking it a little too far, and now we're putting lives at risk for a belief that, like I said, this is all our movie, a belief that you have. I might not have the same view.
Yeah, and I actually think that's part of the why we have kind of the hierarchy in civilization that we do. We have kind of a framework of truths that hopefully, whether we're talking about a city, state, a country, whatever, have a group of beliefs that kind of frame our system. But there's always people outside of that on the parameters of things that are trying to angle for whatever thing their story is telling them is the highest priority. And it's outside the norm. And the problem is we listen to those outside the norm because they're usually the loudest voices.
Always.
And that's the problematic part of it. But I think you're right. I think preserving that house and that family is way more important than getting that brushland and those few trees that are going to go away.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. It's interesting the level and the weight that some people give to some things to me. You know, I get it. Like I'm right there. Like if we're like, for example, I think a good example was it Yosemite that was on fire like last year?
Yeah. Was that Yellowstone? No, Yellowstone
it was Yosemite.
Was the floods.
I'm pretty sure it was Yosemite. Yeah. So you know, Beowulf and I, my wife, for those listening, you know, her and I went to Yosemite and Yellowstone last year. Beautiful places. Yeah. And I think at the time we were there was a massive fire.
They had place not open in Yosemite, right? That you couldn't go to.
Well, that was because of like, I think rain and erosion and flooding as well. But there was also a fire that you could like see in the distance. And for me, it's like, I get, we want to keep those places incredible, pristine, perfect. I've never been a like believer in throwing trash on the ground. Like I'm like, yeah, keep things that you like and love in good condition will last a long time. So I've always been in that position. But for me, it's always been very strange these last few years when people take such a high degree of weight to things are going to happen whether humans are around or not.
Is that back to what we were saying earlier, though? You know, people have too much time on their hands. They're not focused in on the ability to actually survive and live, and focusing on the important things like their family and moving stuff forward in that degree, or keeping us all safe. They've got so much time on their hands. They've had people like yourself create such a layer of protection around them over the course of time that they can take whatever agenda they want and say, I'm going to save the planet in this way. And I'm not saying I'm against saving the planet. I want our home, as you said, to be in good shape for generations and millennials to come. Millennia to come. Millennials
yes.
are okay.
Those to come. Yeah.
We got a whole different thing about.
We're still waiting on another generation, but they'll eventually
come.
show up.
I don't know what letter they're going to use for the next generation, but maybe AA. I don't know.
Yeah, we're running out.
We're going to have to move a language. But that's what the people believe, that we're running out, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But for all of history, people have been apocalyptic. Oh my God!
Are you okay?
This tea or this caffeine I've had today is
killing your veins. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I'm going to say. You know what I'm saying out there, right? Yeah, you always know what I'm saying. So anyway, that for all of time, people have had that perspective that everything's going to end tomorrow. I don't know what that is built into our brains that way, but right now it just seems terribly important to some people, and it's the loud voices that are talking about it, and it focuses attention away from the things that are important in life.
Like life and your family and friends. But yeah, so we've spoken about your military experience. We've spoken about your experience with wildland firefighting. David Weisner, your ancestor, was a blacksmith that forged the tools that you used to forge your knives. What initially got you into the knife making hobby?
I started when I was young, right? Okay. So my grandfather was a farrier, and I just thought it was really interesting, right? I was big into fantasy books, you know, and there's always like the village blacksmith out there forging all the weapons. I was like, yes, that is going to be me, right? And so I fell in love with the idea of it, and then seeing it in action, I was like, this is awesome. Horseshoes suck though. I hate making horseshoes, right? Yeah. So when I got older, I started making knives, and I made my first sword. Well, I guess you could call it a sword, when I was about 9 years old, right? And in my small town, there's just woods everywhere. So you weren't allowed in the house back then, right? That was for grown-up time. So we would just spend so much time out in the woods, just with me and these swords that I would make. I'd wrap leather around the handle. It was awesome. I loved it. And then when I got older, I kept doing it here and there throughout the years. And then when I was in the military, I stopped. Obviously, I couldn't have a forge on base. They shun that. They're like, propane, you're a bomb guy? Hell no. So I stopped when I was in the military. When I got out of the military, I tried again, but it was strange because I couldn't do mindless activities, right? Anytime I did like blacksmithing, there's a point in blacksmithing, yes, hammering it out, getting the shape out, you're all focused. Then you get to grinding and you're like doing stock reduction, and you're just like, and it's just mindless. And when I did that, my mind would go off, which was not a very good place for my mind to go when I first got out. Like I said, it wasn't until I really wrote that book that I was able to do mindless activities. I do mindless activities. I feel like I'm in a fight. Someone's going to come up behind me. I can't talk to anyone. I'm shut back down. I would disassociate. I would feel like this was all fake. I couldn't tell the difference between a dream and reality. It was terrible. And then when I wrote that book, I went through all that therapy. I was like, you know what? I got these tools. Let me give it another shot. I used to love this. I used to love doing this. And I was able to. I didn't have the same emotional response to the mindless activities that went with knives. I could make 1 million billets, but I could never finish them because that was the boring part to me. And that was the part that made my mind wander somewhere else. And so I really honed in on it. And that it's funny because I tell my wife all the time, I'm like, I don't like making the same knife twice. And it's because I do it once and I'm all in. I'm so focused. I make sure everything's perfect. I got to make it meet the hand measurements. The blade's beautiful. I love it. Then I got to make it again. I remember how to make it. It's not as exciting. It's mindless. And who knows where my mind's going to wander off to.
So really, you're a creator.
Yes.
You don't like to duplicate each time. You like to create a new piece of art.
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
What it sounds like.
And that's why I went the custom knife route. It was like, I could make the same knife over and over. I could call it like, this is the Thor's hammer, right? And I could remake that knife 1 million times. I could market it on Etsy, on Facebook, and do all that. But God, that would be just
I think
awful.
We need one that says the Wolf and Bull is what we really need. We need to do a custom Wolf and Bull. That's what we need.
Well, I've been toying with the idea of having a memento wall, and for a funny perspective, getting the poster from the movie Memento and having it there. It's the weird hilarity thing for me. Just have the photo. What's his face? I can't remember his name.
I don't remember the actor.
But I thought it'd be kind of funny. But yeah, no, it's definitely something I'd be interested in. Now we've kind of briefly touched on Saguaro Forge Co.
Yeah.
Now I'd love to dive into that a little bit deeper. Now, please correct me if I'm wrong. I did a little bit of research on the background of forging. What you're doing, is it open die forging, freehand?
Everything is open. I have a hammer, an anvil, and a forge, a propane forge. I started with coal. Takes too long, and you can't trust it. Yeah. How many times I burnt the carbon out of a billet? I was like, I need a real forge, right? Yeah. So I just have that, and everything is done by hand. Even my edges, whetstones, files. I don't do anything that's not traditional. Like I said, I'm trying to keep that link with my ancestors alive, and that's why I love doing what I do, because nothing is handmade anymore. Yeah. No one really truly hand makes anything anymore. You go on Etsy, Amazon, any of these websites, they're just reselling stuff that they bought from a manufacturer overseas.
Yeah.
And they're reselling it for like 8,000% upscale, right? So I really wanted to keep this just art, just a craft, Well,
I'd love to dive into could you, for our listeners, describe the mission of Saguaro Forge Co. and then from start to finish, what does your creation process for a new design kind of look like, and from initial product to finished product?
So it all starts with kind of talking to the people, right? I'll be honest, though. I steer people in directions. I'll have an idea for a knife, and I'm like, man, I want to make that knife. I look at my board, and there's 10 knives on it, and I'm like, I got no time to make this knife. So then someone starts talking to me, and they're like, yeah, I want a chef's knife that, I'm like, could cut meat. A little bit thicker of a spine. I can blue back the spine, right? And I steer them in a direction that I'm already I want to make this knife. I'm upset. I get a little obsessive about it sometimes. And so I steer them in that direction. I measure their hands so I can make sure the handle fits them perfectly, right? Because I need to compete with these manufactured knives that you can buy for $5 on Alibaba, right? So I measure out the hand, and then from there I start with just I have it depends what you want, right? So I can do a patina if you want the blade to be black. I know I got to boil it in vinegar. But I can't use stainless steel for that, because stainless steel doesn't rust. It resists the patina. So I'm like, okay, I can start with 1095 high carbon steel, right? And I start with a little bar of it. Or if you want stainless steel, you want a nice mirror polish on this bad boy. Okay, no, I got to start with a high carbon stainless steel. Just throw it in my forge, heat it up to a certain degree. At this point, I used to have the heat gun, and I would make sure I'm at exact amounts, but I've been molding steel for a hot minute now, so I can tell just from the look of it. And it's funny because when I always initiate forging, I always do it when it's dark so I can actually see the color. Again, Forge and Fire, it's all during the day, man. I ain't going to make it on that show. But I see the color and I start hammering away. Once I get it out to the shape that I want, then it's okay, Now we got to perfect it. I start filing and I start sanding and I start hitting it with the stones until I have it exactly what I'm envisioning. And it's funny. I was telling my wife about this the other day. She's like, you're just out there forging. How are you so mentally trained throughout the day? And I was like, you don't understand. Like my mind is picturing this in like a 3D model and I'm like running over it like a high-tech hologram in my own brain. And I'm doing that every second that I'm forging this out. I'm like, okay. And then sometimes I'll look at it and I'll be like, it'd be better if I did this back in the forge. And I start working it some more until I get it exactly how I want it. And that's the best part of it. I love working the steel because you create this beautiful, useful tool out of just nothing.
You know, it's interesting the way you say that too, because my experience looking at knives, and I have a handful of them, but the visual focus always seems to jump to the handles. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And that sounds like it's the least important part of these things.
From my point of view, handles suck. Well, making the handle sucks for me. It's like the steel is so rewarding and you can create all these awesome shapes and you get the bevel just right. And when you've got a clean bevel and it's like, especially if I start, like this far up the blade and you have that crisp line and then it runs, I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Then I start working the handle and people don't let me use my artistic creation for the handle, right? I love making a handle out of something I've never made before. Like you guys started talking about the wolf and bull. I was like, I have a wolf tooth and I have a bull horn. I could make a handle out of that. Here we go. Boom. Now I'm excited about the handle. But, people are like, oh, I want like a green handle. I'm like, you want me to like... I got this maple burl wood I could put in the middle of it. I could do this spacer. And they're like, no, green. I'm like, oh, okay. Hate it.
Well, my perspective on knives has always been like, if they can cut good, like that's for me. It's like, that's all I care about. I want that thing to go right through something, especially cooking. Like I love obviously in the off chance in my life, knock on wood, that I ever have to defend myself. Like obviously it has to be sharp. So that's my biggest thing is I've always thought the blade for me is kind of the coolest possible thing. Cause it's like, if it does its job, that makes
I was going to say the blade is what does its job, right?
Yeah.
The handle is just a decoration, really.
Yeah.
And I've got these nasty, gnarled hands, so it's like it could be just made out of just a piece of wood, and I'd be happy.
Wolf paws have been
unsanded piece of wood. But no, that's really cool. I think that for me, there's definitely a value in someone who sees a vision in their craft and cares so much about it that it's like it makes them excited. And I don't think
you can obviously see that.
Yeah.
Right here.
I don't think corporate America gets very excited about anything anymore.
And the artisan like yourself, I don't want to say a dying breed because hopefully that doesn't happen, but it's certainly not the way it used to be. Oh, no. Everything from 100 years ago, everything from the buildings you walked into to the furniture you sat on to the utensils you used were handcrafted. And once automation came into play, that kind of got pushed to the fringes of things. Yeah. But I think there's a resurgence of that. I really do think there's a potential for resurgence of that kind of thing. And I know you were talking earlier that you've even gotten into the woodworking side, even though you might not like the handles. The fact is, it's still an artwork. It's still using your abilities to shape things, right?
Oh, yeah. I'll tell you, I wanted to be a knife maker, and now I'm a leathersmith. I'm like a woodworker. I'm a blacksmith. I had to learn so much. I can do these crazy resin. I didn't even know what was in resin like 5 years ago. I'm like, resin? What's resin? Like epoxy?
Well, don't you get some of your materials from the wild? Didn't you say that before, that you get some of the materials from these fires you've been in?
Yep. So every wildfire that I fought, I brought, minus the first one that I fought when I got the idea for it. I was like, man, I should have brought a Folgers can out here, right? Every fire I brought like a little Folgers can. And I would go, every time we did a burn, I would scoop up a bunch of ashes and I would grab a bunch of fried wood, not from the forest, but I would grab all that, right? And I would label it and I'd bring it back home. And I just had like the stockpile of it. And then what happened was I was like, okay, I wanted to create this business. So I don't know if we touched kind of the backstory, but the reason I walked away from Wildland Firefighting was because my youngest son was diagnosed with extreme autism, nonverbal and everything. And when I came back from this past season, I think I came back from the not McCash, that was in California. The Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon fire in New Mexico is the largest wildfire in New Mexico history. I spent 3 weeks out there, 23 days. When I came home, my son didn't recognize me. I couldn't hug him. I couldn't be around him. He would start stimming out. And I just was like, you know what? I've been gone for so long. I've been doing this for so many years, the military and deployments and wildland and deployments. I need to figure out what I'm going to do. How can I be home? I was like, I love making knives. Maybe I could sell some knives, right? So I was like, okay, I got all these firefighter buddies. Bing! You guys want some custom fire knives? I'll sell them to you real cheap, right? And that's how I started, right? I started making these custom, and I'd put their little insignias or whatever they wanted, dates of the fires, name of the fire, and I would engrave that onto the blades with the handles actually made from resin and ash from whatever fire they were on.
Wow.
That is very cool.
So I started doing that, and it got a little weird though after that, because now I'm actually making handles like family heirlooms where it's their deceased mothers or whatever, and I'm mixing those ashes with the resin.
You know, as strange as that may sound, that's kind of a trend I've heard about in different creative things out there, that people want just a remnant of ash from their relatives involved in whatever the product is they're coming up with. So that's going to be a growing thing for you, I bet.
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, initially I was like, you want me to what?
Like, well, as long as they don't, I'd say as long as they don't give you like, here's the femur from
one of my victims,
Uncle Bob. Yeah, exactly. One of your victims. Hey,
this person died of natural causes.
See these knives? These were from each of my victims.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Well, that would be bad. But just a side question. How old's your son now?
3.
3 years old. Okay, so incredibly formative years for any child, but in particular for an autistic child. I have an autistic son myself, and it sounds like yours is a different part of the spectrum perhaps, but it is hugely important, hugely important for time to be spent with those children, because they're special kids. They really are. So and it sounded to me like you really loved going out in there and fighting the fires, and maybe someday you'll be able to do some of that again, once things have developed to a certain stage. But I think that it's funny listening to this story. You've moved your chapters along, and you've been intentional about it, which is that's very interesting to me, and something that I think is important for listeners or viewers to hone in on, because we all have that opportunity, and most of us don't try to write our own story at all. We just react.
Yeah, I feel like not a lot of people realize that it's their story. It's like weird analogy, but this is kind of what I was talking to my wife about not too long ago. I was like, I feel like a lot of people, it's like we're living in this box, right? And we don't really know why we're there, what is there, what's outside of this box, and there's no answers. But it's like there's a task in front of us, and a voice is like, build it. And a lot of people are like, okay, so I guess my purpose is to build this tool. And they live like their whole lives just, I put this together, and they just keep tinkering with it. I've never been like that. If I was in that box, I'm like, wait, where are we? What are we doing? Why am I doing this? It's always been these questions, and I've always had to come up with these answers for the question. And I can't do something just to do it. It has to be intentional. Everything I do has to be intentional. I have to know why, and I have to know what it is that I'm doing. I can't just go in blindly. So it's like the military. I wanted to do that. I did it. The wildland, I was like, you know what? I don't want a normal job. I did it. And then when it was time to hang it up, it was like, okay, I want to be there with my son. And I did it. I don't want to work a desk job. I know I can't handle that. So I didn't. Everything I did, I made those decisions. In my life, I'm not the wealthiest person in the world, but here I am because I made all the choices that I wanted to do. the only regret I might have when I die is I could have made more money. Probably. I just didn't, I'm hoping that's the only regret that I have. And that's how I've steered my entire life.
Well, it's the old story about the tombstone, right? There's a birth date and an end date. And the only important part is the dash in between, right?
Exactly.
And it sounds like you're intentionally making that dash your own. Mm-hmm. And that's a hugely important message.
Yeah.
No, yeah. Well, thank you.
That's very, very cool. So we've obviously touched on a lot of things. You mentioned one thing in our prior conversation that I want to touch on because it's very interesting to me. You mentioned that you developed an app that's a local virtual market.
Yes.
Can we go into that?
Absolutely. So I didn't know business, right? I had been in public service my entire adult life, right? Military, paramedic, EMT, wildland firefighter, and I never really understood business. So when I got into the knife, I was like, man, everyone needs knives. Everyone's going to buy knives, and I can custom make knives. And I learned really quick that the American dream is in China. It's in Pakistan. It's in India. It's not here, right? What's manufactured here? And I started looking at all these people that were claiming these handcrafted knives. They're like handmade knives, $60. And I'm looking at the knife. I'm like, I couldn't make that for 40. I'd lose money on that. How could you handcraft that for $60? So I learned that everything was being manufactured overseas. You can't go on Etsy. Every time you buy something on Etsy, it's someone who's reselling something they bought from a manufacturer. Amazon, right? Even the DeWalt discs, the flap discs for metalwork, you can buy them for 1 cent a pop from Alibaba or one of those other manufacturers. And if you buy enough, you get them customized with your logo. So all these people were selling, I was seeing exact same pictures. They weren't even taking their own pictures. They were buying these sets like resin and wood handles, Damascus, blades, all sorts of stuff. The set's $20. It says right there. And they put their logo on it, claim it's handcrafted. I'm like, what, you put a screw on it, right? You like bolted in some different screws and now it's handmade in the USA. And they were selling it for like $120 for a set and saying handcrafted. And people, I'm looking, they have like 20,000 sales. I'm like, what the heck, right? How am I supposed to do what I'm supposed to do? And I started paying attention and I realized everyone's doing it. I go on Facebook, I don't want to name names. I wish I could, but I go on Facebook. I get these sponsored ads for all these handcrafted knives. And now I know enough about it. I can spot it a mile away. I'm like, oh yeah, I know that knife's $5.82.
I feel like I'm gonna have to show him all my knives now and be like, which one's real, which one's fake.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's going to give you an answer. You might not like it on some of them, right?
Maybe, yeah.
If you bought them from Cabela's, Amazon, anything, fake.
Oh, thank God I didn't.
Yeah. So it got so difficult, and I started paying attention, and it was everything. Like the table legs that I made for my buddy the other day. He ordered table legs from Etsy, right? And the guy was like, oh, sorry, it's going to take me about 4 weeks. And then he texted him or sent him a message 3 weeks in. He's like, oh, I'm waiting for them to get back from the powder coater, all sorts of stuff. They showed up. I'm like, dude, that's 18 gauge steel. That's not powder coat. Let me look. I go on the Chinese manufacturer. There they are.
Right there.
Guess what the shipping time was? 4 weeks.
Wow.
So the people are claiming the handcrafted and just selling, right? And Etsy is 100% like that. Amazon's like that. It's crazy. So what I did was I was like, okay, how can I bring back shopping in American products, American handmade products? And this stupid, but the slogan that came in my head was eliminate the made in China from your life. Right. And just that slogan, I ran with it. And all right, this was a long time ago, but in high school, I took every single computer programming class they offered. It was like Windows 98, but the language was roughly the same, right? And so I went to work and I spent about 1,000 hours making an app that takes your location and it connects you to people in your neighborhood that are craftsmen, local craftsmen. And it was like, why are you buying from someone who's reselling you stuff from China that lives in Wisconsin when your neighbor who's like 2 floors down makes the exact same thing, you know? And that was the whole purpose of the app. So it's a marketplace, it's a directory, and it connects people to their local handcrafted products, really to eliminate the made in China from your life.
And there's a lot of that out here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of handmade. Nobody knows about them, right? So a perfect example, a platform for them.
Yeah. And how do you find them? What, you Google? Or
you won't find them.
You'll never find them.
Yeah, maybe on the 12th Google page or whatever, if you're really digging into it, because as you know, the stuff you look for first is the stuff you're talking about that's coming from somewhere else.
Yeah. And you see, and pictures are so deceptive, some of these knives look perfect because they were manufactured, right? A CNC water jet machine gets you to 1,000th of an inch, right? So everyone looks perfect. You can't tell the difference between that knife. I would cut that knife in half with one of my knives, but you couldn't tell until you picked up my knife and you felt that difference, it was just dirty.
That is awesome.
I didn't understand.
Yeah. No, that's actually a really, really incredible point you bring up, because I'm like, I see it all the time too. Like, I'm always wary of Etsy. Like, I'll buy off of Etsy if I've met the person. Like, some of the stuff around the studio is from Etsy. I think those particular little buggers behind here are from them. And actually, the guys in this area, I saw them at the shout out Brahms Bug Box. Saw them at the little, what's it called, the Renaissance Fair around here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's where I met him. But yeah, it's all over the place. And I used to be in the digital marketing sphere, so I understand. It's like, you got these big companies that are going to come in and they're going to bid on a specific keyword, and there's not a single person in the entire world outside of maybe Amazon that is ever going to be able to take the first place on that keyword. And when people search for those things, they're going maybe to the bottom of the first page, maybe. So it's like, it's incredible that you've done something like that, because that's something that's, I think, needed, and frankly, in the United States, no, not everyone is, has, especially now, $1 million to spend on things, but the difference in quality, I think, outpaces the 20, 30, 40 bucks you'll save.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
Just me,
And I think it's almost like, I feel like it's almost like a social status thing too, right? When you're surviving and you're just trying to feed your kids and do it as cheap as possible, yeah, I got you. Go to Walmart, buy the cheapest stuff that you can, right? But as you elevate social status, it's like people want to buy things that associate with what they perceive that status. You're upper middle class. You don't go to Walmart anymore, right? You go to Target. It's the same exact thing, but you move your perceptions of it, And I feel like, of course, not everyone can afford a handcrafted custom knife, and that's totally fine.
But I think that's why you're talking about it. You're in the artisan space. You got unique, one-of-a-kind items. I mean, you could duplicate them over and over. You could set up a pattern and send it off to some manufacturer, OEM, overseas if you wanted to. But why? Yeah. Because then that takes away the unique nature of what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, looking at the kids, watching my kids, I'm like, man, how much are they in China?
Yeah.
Okay, no. I got morals. I can't do that. But yeah, it's crazy. And it's crazy to me that app didn't exist. No one had made it before. Yeah. No one had thought. It's like, do people not know that everything they buy is from overseas?
Well, I don't think people consider it. Yeah, I don't think they think about it. I mean, my biggest thing is like, I get what you're saying. Like, artisan, obviously, there's a level of crafting there that is specific, and it deserves the whatever monetary price that you choose to put on something, because it takes your time, your equipment, your forging materials, for lack of a better word. And a lot of people, I feel like, are that way. But my question that I've always had is, okay, well, just wait till we get into a hot situation with China. All that's going to go away. All that made in China stuff's going to go away. It'll be cut right off at the legs. And I look at the situation artisanally, or people who are nearby, and I'm going to be looking at those people and saying, okay, well, I need a knife. I'm going to go to that person, because I can't go to China anymore. If that happens, I'm just going to put my hands up and say if, because who knows? Who knows? People made predictions for the last 20 years on that. But
yeah, there's a lot of nearshoring coming back to, in particular, Mexico is a big place for that. And the manufacturers down there making some of these same things are the same manufacturers that are over there anyway. So how those geopolitical, economic, and retail kind of things happen, they always find a way to happen. But I think there's a differentiator, and you spoke about it a minute ago. And when you want just some normal knives and your economic station is that you better go down to Walmart, then absolutely go do that. But if you want a unique quality knife or any of the things on your platform that you're talking about, then now you have an opportunity to go find that locally to get something done. Because to me, a lot of times, and I'm from Michigan, and I go back there. I used to go down to a place called Chippewa, Indiana, and it wasn't Amish. It was, I think, Mennonites or something like that. And you knew when you went down there that almost everything you could possibly buy at their swap meets was handmade. Mm-hmm. All the farm tools, all there. But that's how I grew up and how I knew, and that is lost on everybody today.
It's gone. It's a sad thing because you see so many. It's like the blacksmiths, right? I think Benjamin Franklin gave a speech about how blacksmiths were the most important part of society because you couldn't have a barber without a blacksmith. You couldn't have a chef without a blacksmith. You couldn't have anything without someone who would make what you use. And then the Industrial Revolution came along, and blacksmiths became machinists. They became, along those scales. And we still need them. I mean, look, everything is made out of steel, but it's all made somewhere else. Mm-hmm. It's not made locally. And what I do used to be a necessity, and now it's just a hobby. People just say it's a hobby, or that's how they think about it,
Yeah.
Sad. I wish we could get back to those days that you're talking about.
I think we can. Yeah. I think we can. I think there's going to be a heavy push for that, especially for some people if we reach the perfect social standard that some individuals want to see for our future utopia, per se. If we ever reach that, I think that even if we don't, I think it'll come back. I mean, I think people, like I worked a desk job, and this is what I do now. I mean, I still have to sit at a desk, but it's a lot different, And I think a lot of people are going to come out of those situations, the corporate world, and say, F all that. I don't want to do that anymore. I've been burned out on it. The companies clearly don't care. I mean, they hire people and have them on for 6 months and teach them absolutely nothing. They don't give them any quality skills that they can translate unless they have those skills prior. And then they hold them, and then they get fired in 6 months, and they're apathetic. I think people are going to move out of that. That's personally my opinion. Hopefully I'm correct on that. But Bradley, it's been phenomenal talking with you. Honestly, incredible story.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you for your service. Honestly,
I appreciate that,
absolutely,
guys.
Man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's definitely something I think I want people to be aware of. Now, for our listeners and viewers, what is the best possible way for them to find your content? 2, them to support you, and anything that you want to add in for any services or any thing that is on your heart.
So best place to find me is just the Google. Hit me with Saguaro Forge Co. It'll take you to my website or to my Instagram and Facebook, and you can see all my different knives that I've made. I do a lot of different, like I said, everything's custom. So a lot of times when I have a lot of orders, I make them, one picture, package, out the door. And the next one, right? Because I'm trying to hand make products at a rate that keeps up with what people want. So my Instagram's probably the best way to see all the work I've done, where my website's the best place to order.
Gotcha.
Knife. Just to support, I just support your local worker, your local handcrafted, skilled worker who can make something for you if you want a knife. Anything like that. So you can buy one or just share one of my pictures. Try and get those out, that you can see the difference between what I craft and what else is out there. Or you can download the app. I am on Google and iOS, Apple, right? It's just Villagers Market, Villagers with a Z. And then you can download that and you can look at local products near you. I got some really cool stuff on there. So you guys should probably check it out.
Very cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's good stuff, man.
Yeah.
It really is.
It is.
And then if you guys need some table legs, let me know.
We actually we might need a table.
I think we do need a table.
Yeah. There's going to be some big changes for Wolf of Bull.
Yeah. But I'm telling you right now, ever since we talked about it a half an hour ago, I'm thinking a knife. The Wolf and Bull. I'm telling you, we got to get one of these. We've got to sit down with you and figure out what to do with that.
I got to get the memento wall up and going. Once we get a table, a lot of steps. But yeah, no, Bradley, thank you again for joining us. And thank you to the listeners. We appreciate you. We honestly would not be where we are today without you guys. And if you happen to like our content, you can find it on Instagram at The Wolf and Bull. We're also on YouTube and we are on Rumble. Now, granted, I didn't ask for a subscription earlier. Hopefully this episode brought you some quality content, some entertainment, some insight into, the military aspects of the United States, knife making, and wildland firefighting. Before talking with you, I actually had never considered that, to be honest. Like, what is the various differences? So yeah, I thought it was a very interesting conversation. Hopefully you found it to be a very interesting conversation as well. So if you leave us a like and a subscription, that would be absolutely wonderful. Again, you can find us at The Wolf and Bull on Instagram and on YouTube. And we have episodes every Thursday audio-wise and every Friday video-wise. Thank you again, and we will catch you next week.